Hi, ICOM 101 students. So to review really quickly, we've talked about emerging media, we've talked about storytelling, and so that leaves us with design thinking as our third core area of study in the digital media minor. So in this video, I want to talk about design thinking, what it is, why you would use it, how it works. So first, let's kind of review where we left off. We've kind of established some statements about emerging media and storytelling based around some of the models we've seen, like information interaction design and collective intelligence. So we know that there's a lot of stuff that you don't know, and the goal is to know what you don't know, to move things from the category of things you don't know to things you don't know. And we've also talked about how you can use computers and networks of computers and people who are using those computers to collect data like numbers, text, pictures, etc., which can be organized and turned into information. You can use participatory storytelling to turn that information into knowledge. And we've talked about the fact that the internet is really this big network of information that allows everyone to use their computers to collect everyone's data all together, organize it, and turn it into information. If you don't have some data, someone else might have it. If you don't have some way of organizing that data, someone else might. And if you don't have stories, someone else might have those. You might be able to participate in a story with others online. And so the result of all of this is collective intelligence, or thinking better. And a really good example to illustrate what we've learned so far is Wikipedia. So with Wikipedia, we have a site with pages that can be organized and reorganized in different ways, that can be organized by association, and that basically collect data and turn it into information. And it's done not individually, but as a group, as a network of people all contributing whatever they can to Wikipedia. So some people have expertise in certain areas, they can get on those pages, they can add their expertise, and they can avoid areas they don't know anything about. And so the result is that we get the data, the information, and the knowledge from everybody's hard work, resulting in a collection of knowledge, Wikipedia itself, that isn't possible with just one person's efforts toward creating knowledge. It's a group effort, it's a collective intelligence. So this week we're going to look at how we design these things. We've looked at I Love Bees, we just talked about Wikipedia, but how are these things made? They make use of these concepts. They make use of emerging media, they make use of storytelling. How were they designed the way they were designed? How do you make things like this? How do you make emerging media systems? How do you make networks for emerging media? How do you tell stories with emerging media? And the answer here is design thinking. Design thinking is a process for solving problems, and it's a process for solving problems that we use in the minor. Tim Brown, who wrote the article in the Harvard Business Review that you are reading this week, calls design thinking a methodology, which isn't the same as a process, but we're not going to get too deep into the semantics here. So for this class, I'll use the term process where Brown uses the term methodology. And to understand design thinking, we really need to understand two major concepts of what it's about: what a problem is and what a process is. So design thinking is all about finding solutions to problems. So what is a problem? Well, this week I'm having you read a piece by Buchanan that summarizes the concept of problems and a little bit of research related to them. And honestly, I only expect you to understand up to probably about page 98 in this reading, because after that it gets really dense. But the original idea Buchanan is writing about comes from Horace Routel, who in the 1960s was trying to figure out what the best way to design something was. And he said, it all goes back to what the problem is. And so he starts by looking at problems, because designs solve problems. What everyone is really trying to do with design is solve problems. There's things that don't work right. Plumbers fix problems in pipes, parents fix problems in their kids' behaviors, Facebook solves the problem of keeping in touch with people who move in and out of your life. So design is being used to solve problems. And he realized that there's really two types of problems in the world. Problems like math problems that have factual solutions, based on leading theories of fields, like leading theories on mathematics, What is 2 by 2, for example? It's 4. That's what the theory says. There are no competing theories that offer a better solution. What is the capital of Indiana? It's Indianapolis. And then he says we have something different, which is wicked problems, or problems that don't have one right solution that everyone can agree on based on fact and established theories. Wicked problems, he argued, have multiple solutions, some of which are better than others. And this is important, he says, because the only way to design then is to figure out some of the possible solutions and then figure out which of those is the best, and to understand that sometimes a good solution later becomes a bad solution because the nature of the problem changes. Wicked problems are moving targets, and the only way to find a solution to them is to investigate as much as possible into what's causing the problem and what the effects of the problem are, and then test a solution to see if you got the solution even remotely right. A process is a series of steps that you take, in this case, to solve a problem. A problem, again, is something that doesn't work right. It's not sorted out all the way. The goal is to sort it out. There's something that you want to make work better. The steps you take to go from sort of not working to working, or not sorted out very well to sorted out better, is the process. In design thinking, and here we get into Brown's work, there are 3 main steps. The first is inspiration, which is figuring out what the problem really is. Not what people say it is, not what you guess it is, not what it looks like from the outside, but what it really truly is. Really pulling data on what the situation is for people who are experiencing the problem. And then he says we tell stories about the problem because, again, stories help us create knowledge from data and information. So we tell stories about the problem. What is it like to experience the problem? See if you can actually go and experience the problem. That way you have as much knowledge as possible about the problem. If your problem is a lack of water in a rural area, go live in the rural area for a bit and see how things really work there. See what the stories are and what's really going on. The second step is ideation, coming up with ideas for making the thing better and seeing if they work. So you have a problem, you've experienced the problem, you've built knowledge around a problem, and now you have to kind of figure out what might solve this problem. And Brown writes that we should tell stories about what it's like when the solution exists. So now we tell stories about the proposed solution, so it helps people understand how the solution might work. And then 3, implementation. So you make your solution the new way of things. You kind of solve the problem to the best of your abilities, and that becomes the new way things are. You just have to make it work in the implementation step. A good example here that is well known in the design world is that of Amtrak. Brown co-founded IDEO, a big design firm that practices design thinking, and the story goes that Amtrak once hired them for a project. Amtrak, of course, is the service provider of passenger train travel in the United States. Amtrak wanted to redesign how people got on and off the trains. And here you're seeing a picture from the interior of one of their passenger trains. And when IDEO asked why, why do you want to redesign how people get in and out of the trains? Why are we focusing on the trains? Well, the Amtrak execs were convinced that the trains were really the centerpiece of their business. And in their minds, everything came back to the trains. And they just needed to make it easier to showcase their trains and get the trains to where people like to board. But when IDEO actually looked, when they actually investigated the problem and sent designers out to look for data and information and to find stories to build knowledge from, and they actually got on Amtrak trains and talked to people who take the trains, did interviews, looked up data, it turns out that it wasn't actually the trains that were causing any kind of problem. It was the whole experience. If you've ever taken an Amtrak train, you know that it just kind of sucks. It's just largely pretty awful. It's hard to buy tickets. The route maps online are confusing. Not all the trains go in, simple to understand networks and patterns. The stations are confusing a lot of times. The Amtrak station in Indianapolis is very confusing because it's also the Greyhound station. All the food is microwaved on board, as far as I can tell. It's just not pleasant. The trains are probably one of the least important aspects of the experience, since when you get on the trains, like, no one's really on them. You get 4 seats to yourself. It just kind of is what it is, and you're not cramped for space or anything like that like you are on a flight. All the trains kind of seem more or less the same in the US anyway. So using design thinking by not assuming what the problem was, but instead actually going and looking for data, organizing that data into information and telling stories around it to generate knowledge, IDEO was able to create a new experience for Amtrak that was a holistic experience. It started with the website. How do people find where the trains go? How do they buy tickets? And it included the trains as just one step along the user's journey, from the moment they get on the website to look out routes or buy a ticket to the moment they step foot off of an Amtrak train at their destination. So after you research the problem and understand it to the best of your abilities, you have to generate a lot of ideas for solving it and test those ideas to see which ones really work. That's the second step, ideation. The third step, implementation. You take your ideas and you make them real. And we call this a user-centered process because we involve users at every step of the way. When investigating the problem, we ask people about it. We ask for their stories, we observe them, we try to understand the problem from the perspective of the people who are experiencing the problem, rather than from the perspective of outsiders. And then when we come up with the solutions, we run them by people, or we test them on people to see if it helps solve the problem for those people. So in the user-centered design process, the approach is centered around people, their points of view, and how they experience the problems rather than the problems directly.